guys, welcome to Audrey's reading area. Shout out to my grandbabies, Korea, Sanaa, D3, David the Third, and Kaden. I love you guys. I miss you guys so much. Now, everybody, don't forget to click like, click share. Don't forget to go over to YouTube and smash that subscribe button on Audrey's reading area. Alexa, what time is Audrey's reading area?
Audrey reads in her area live at 8 o'clock p.m.
Live at 8, you guys. I'm just going to jump right into this book. Today is someone special in the black community. He passed away, but he did a whole lot of for us. Senator John Lewis. Today's his birthday, so we are going to shout him out for his birthday. Today's also Nina Simone's birthday. So Nina Simone, happy birthday. She's also passed away. But John Lewis, happy birthday. I have a John Lewis book that I'm going to read. I'll try to get Nina Simone's book for tomorrow. John Lewis, Get to Know the Statesman Who Marched for Civil Rights. This book was written by Jehan Jones-Radgowski, Fact Finders. On the back it says, the lives of history makers from the past and the present should be shared. I agree. These people you should know: teachers, leaders, activists, and writers have shaped the world we live in today. John Lewis, as a young man, John Lewis was a leader of the civil rights movement. Today, he represents the people of Alabama as a respected member of Congress. I think this book is old. Learn more about John, what he stands for, and the marches he led for a more equal America. So, I'll read a little bit about John Lewis today for his birthday. So, Freedom Rider. On May 4th, 1961, 22-year-old John Lewis waited for a bus in Washington, D.C. He and 12 men and women, both black and white, would ride 2 buses to New Orleans, Louisiana. The riders would later be known as the Freedom Riders. Their goal was to break long-held practices of discrimination. At bus stations, they would ignore whites-only signs. They would sit together where they could. Doing this meant they risked being stopped, arrested, or attacked by angry mobs. But they vowed to resist peacefully. If they were arrested, they would not pay fines or post bail. If they faced violence, they would not return it. That's interesting, right? 2 lanes. For nearly 100 years, this is the next page. For nearly 100 years, African Americans had experienced segregation while traveling. Well, they experienced segregation anyway. I'm just saying. They could not sit in the front of the buses. Black and white people had separate places to wait at bus or train stations. But on June 3rd, 1946, the United States Supreme Court ruled against segregated seating on buses that traveled interstate. And in December of 1960, they added bathrooms, waiting rooms, lunch counters, and any other facility associated with interstate travel that ruling. However, rulings were often ignored, especially in the southern United States. Many white Southerners refused to integrate, believing that people should be separate based on their skin color. Discrimination, by the way, discrimination means treating people unfairly because of their race, their country of birth, their gender, or their religion. Bail. Bail is a sum of money paid to a court to allow someone accused of a crime to be set free until his or her trial. That's what bail is. Segregation. Segregation is the practice of keeping groups of people apart, especially based on race. Keeping them apart, separating them. See, it says waiting room for colored only. Separating them. The riders passed quietly through Virginia, but in Charlotte, North Carolina, Joe Perkins asked for a shoe shine at a whites-only shoe shine chair. He was arrested, and the other riders had to continue on without him. 6 days into the trip, the bus stopped in Rock Hill, South Carolina. John was attacked as he tried to enter a whites-only waiting room. In Winsboro, black riders were arrested at a whites-only lunch counter. On May 14, the buses passed through Anniston, Alabama. One was attacked on the road, windows were smashed, and tires were slashed. A firebomb was thrown on board. The bus caught fire. The riders tried to escape, but the doors were blocked. Someone yelled, "Burn them alive!" When they ran off the bus, the attackers waited outside. The second bus made it to the station. The angry mob boarded the bus and beat the passengers. The driver made it to Birmingham, Alabama, but the riders were attacked there too. Jim Peck needed 53 stitches. Walter Bergman suffered permanent brain damage after being treated. Ticket to Ride. So I'm trying to get back to where we were talking about John Lewis. John here had proven he was willing to risk everything for equality, but it was only the beginning of his battle. So John Lewis was born in Troy, Alabama on February 21st, today, 1940. His parents, Eddie and Willie Mae, were poor farmers. They grew corn, peanuts, and cotton. John had 9 brothers and sisters. Everyone had to help on the farm. When John was young, his main job was to take care of the chickens. He treated them like special pets. He would read them the Bible, the family's only book, to them. He would read that. Aw. There was only one school for black children in Johnstown. There were 2 rooms for all the students. There was no running water or indoor plumbing. In the winter, John and his friends searched for sticks and branches to burn in the tiny stove to keep them warm. Wow. Everything in the school was homemade or bought by the community. On rainy days, the old bus they rode would get stuck in the mud. The students would have to get off and push it to school. Wow. On the way to his school, John's bus passed buses and schools for white children. The buses were shiny and traveled on paved roads. The whites-only schools were new and had playgrounds. John also noticed something else. We drove past prison work gangs almost every day, he said. The prisoners were always black, as were the folks working in the fields beyond them. You couldn't help but notice. John could only go to school when there was no work to do, but he wanted to learn. Sometimes he would jump on the bus, even though he was needed at home. When John was 11, he took a trip with his uncle to New York. Going from the segregated South to the integrated North was shocking. John said arriving in New York was like stepping into a movie, into a strange, otherworldly place. He was shocked to see white and black people living in the same neighborhoods. This visit convinced John that people of different races could and should live, play, and study together. So I'm going to show you a picture of children playing in Harlem. Well, this is John's early years. Let me show you this first. John's early years. Now I'm going to show you the picture of the kids playing together in Harlem, a neighborhood in New York. Manhattan, New York, that is. Yes. John wasn't the only one who thought this way. In the summer of 1954, the Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus Board of Education. They said that separating schools by race was unconstitutional. Schools were to integrate as soon as possible, and John was excited for the change. I thought that, come fall, I'd be riding a state-of-the-art bus to a state-of-the-art school, he said, an integrated school. But things did not change. In Alabama and in other southern states, the leaders of John's state did not obey the Supreme Court's ruling. Life continued as it had been before, segregated. Not equal. Separate but equal was a phrase used to describe the segregation system in most southern states. The idea was that separating groups by race was good for the community. As long as all children received the same education, it shouldn't matter. But the education white children received was often much better. Their schools were better funded, better constructed, and better supplied. There was very little that was truly equal. So to integrate means to bring people of different races together in schools and other public places, getting them together. Unconstitutional means a law that goes against something set forth in the Constitution. Resistance. John knew that segregation was wrong. He also knew that the idea that some people were better than others because of the color of their skin is wrong. I would come home and ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why? They'd say, accept what is. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. One day, things would be better, but John didn't want to wait. He didn't want to wait. A black moviegoer entered the colored entrance of a segregated movie theater in Mississippi. Probably, yeah, the back door or something. The year 1955 was a landmark one for John. It was a landmark one for John. The voice of a powerful preacher from Atlanta, Georgia, I think we all know who that was, rang out over the radio. This preacher's style of speaking and his commanding voice made John stop and listen. His sermon urged people to fight to make their lives better. It seemed like Martin Luther King Jr. was speaking directly to me, saying, John Lewis, you too can do something. You can make a contribution. MLK. So we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. for a second. Martin Luther King Jr., MLK, was an activist and a minister. He played a key role in the civil rights movement. He had a leading role in the nonviolent protest and movement. He also spoke out against the Vietnam War, which was from 1955 to 1975, poverty and inequality. But he was assassinated in 1968. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends, said Martin Luther King Jr. Not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. That's powerful. That's powerful. To assassinate means to murder a person who is well known or important. Wow. Other events moved John to speak up. That fall, 14-year-old Emmett Till was viciously murdered after a white woman said he flirted with her. 15-year-old John realized that the same thing could happen to him or to any of his friends or family. He was angry at the system that allowed black men and boys to die. He was angry that he couldn't do anything to stop it. On December 1st, a woman named Rosa Parks was arrested while riding a public bus. The bus had a white section and a colored section. Rosa was sitting in the colored section, but rules stated that white riders had a right to a seat if the bus was full. A white man wanted her seat. Rosa was tired. She refused to move. Did you know Rosa Parks was not the first bus passenger to refuse to give her a seat? Residents of Montgomery had been fighting for bus equality since 1954. Claudette Calvin and Mary Louise Smith were also arrested for that same reason. So Rosa Parks was arrested and fined. She refused to pay. Later, both she and her husband lost their jobs. This is Rosa Parks getting arrested. They're fingerprinting her. Signed into law. In 2007, the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act was passed. The act gave the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, the ability to explore murders involving unsolved civil rights violations that happened earlier than 1970. In 2016, it was expanded to include events before 1980. In 2017, Till's accuser, Carolyn Bryant, admitted that she lied. In March 2018, the DOJ reopened the case. Rosa was the secretary of the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is the NAACP. She was tired of discriminatory rules. Local leaders called for a boycott of buses in Montgomery, Alabama. The boycott began on December 5th. African Americans made up about 75% of all the bus riders in the city. So you know what that means if they stop riding the bus, because all the black people made up of 75% of the bus riders. More than 90% of them stayed off the buses that day. The boycott was such a success that the organizers decided to keep it going. In total, about 40,000 African American passengers boycotted buses on December 5th. Now, boycott means to refuse to take part in something as a way of making a protest. And this is one of the pictures of them boycotting. Some boycotters walked 3 to 5 miles, 4.8 to 8 kilometers, rather than ride the bus. Here's another picture. Yes, boycotters. Don't ride the buses to work, to town, to school, or anywhere. If you work, take a cab or share a ride or walk, a leaflet advised. Black taxi drivers lowered their fares to 10 cents, the same price as the bus. Other people worked out carpool schedules to get to and from work. They walked or rode a bike. The boycott lasted for 13 months. That's a year and a month. One whole year and a month. And was the first large-scale demonstration in the United States against segregation. On November 23, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled that bus segregation went against the U.S. Constitution. The boycott had worked. The boycott was inspiring to 16-year-old John, who had followed its every move in the news. So when it was time to make his own protest, he was ready. John had gone to the Pike County Public Library and tried to apply for a library card. The library was for white people only, and the librarian refused his application. John went home and wrote a petition. He argued that black people should be able to use the public library too. He asked all his schoolmates and friends to sign their names. Then he mailed the appeal to the library. The librarian never responded, but John was proud of his first act of defiance. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to continue to speak up, speak out, he said later. So what a petition is a letter signed by many people asking leaders for a change. So this was the first sit-in. I'll hold this up so you can read about the first sit-in. Pause and read. Did you know? Pause and read. Yes. I'm going to read the Did You Know. In 1998, John wrote a book called Walking with the Wind. That year, he visited the Pike County Public Library for a book signing. Afterward, the library gave him the card he had been denied in 1956. Wow. So a sit-in is a form of protest in which demonstrators refuse to leave a place. They're sitting in there. Sit in. Desegregate, to get rid of any laws or practices that separate people in different races. So the picture I just showed you, and I'm going to show it again. The 5 men who participated in Tucker's sit-in entered the library and quietly began to read. They were arrested for disorderly conduct when they were just sitting in, reading. Wow. In 1957, John graduated high school and wanted to go to college. He had applied to a school nearby, a whites-only school. He had never heard back. So he wrote another letter, this time to Martin Luther King Jr. I told him I needed his help, John said. Martin Luther King Jr. rose in the activist community after being elected spokesman for the Montgomery bus boycott. Martin Luther King Jr., you guys. By the time MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., wrote back, John had been accepted at American Baptist College in Nashville, Tennessee. Martin Luther King Jr. still wanted to see him. He sent John a bus ticket and told him to join him in Montgomery. The meeting between Martin Luther King Jr. and the boy from Troy was monumental. John graduated from American Baptist College in 1961 and Fisk University in 1967. Did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. said he would help John sue the college that had rejected him? But he also told John that it would be dangerous. His parents could lose their land or be threatened. After thinking it over, John decided not to sue. Picture of the college. He didn't want his family to lose stuff. People, they had to think about their families too. So there's all these different stories on John. You can pause and read. Pause and read. Nonviolent dreams. Pause and read. In 1965, John organized a peaceful protest in Selma, Alabama. The protesters wanted to improve voter rights in the state. While black people had the ability to vote, obstacles had been put in place by white lawmakers to make it difficult for them to do so. This is a picture of John in an office in New York City in 1964. Yes, John Lewis. The first protest took place on March 7, 1965. John planned to march from Selma to Montgomery. As they crossed the bridge just outside Selma, Alabama, state troopers demanded they turn around. Those who did not do so were beaten by the police officers. Tear gas was thrown at them. Many of the marchers were injured. John's skull was fractured. Journalists were there to capture the event. They called it Bloody Sunday. News stations broadcast the images around the world. People were horrified to see violence used against peaceful protesters. Later, there were two more marches. John, Martin Luther King Jr., and hundreds of supporters finally made it across the bridge and into Montgomery on the third try. Here is a picture of a picture of John being beaten by a state trooper at the march on Selma, 1965. They got a picture of John right here being beaten right here by the cops, by the police. Did you know John was one of the big six leaders of the civil rights movement? The other five are Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins, and Whitney Young. John is the only leader, it says still alive today, but sadly he did pass away. Let me just make a note that MLK, which is what they're referring to, Martin Luther King Jr., MLK is what they're using in this book, but I think that his name is so important that I'm saying his whole name, Martin Luther King Jr. I'm not going to just read MLK. I think his name is that important. So I'm going to note that. It's a movement. Bloody Sunday was a turning point in the civil rights movement. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act on August 6, 1965. It prohibited racial discrimination in voting. In 1977, the congressman in Georgia's 5th Congressional District was made an ambassador. This meant his spot in Congress was empty. John ran for the office. He lost, but continued his work in civil rights. In 1981, he served on the Atlanta City Council. He ran for Congress again in 1986, and he won. He has been reelected in every election since, winning by wide margins every time. I'm about to show you a picture of John's work paved the way for President Barack Obama to be elected in 2008 and again in 2012. This is Obama putting this medal around John Lewis. Yes. 2001, President Barack Obama awarded John the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's what that medal was. I'll show it to you again. Yes. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award given to a civilian. In 2013, John wrote March, the first book in a 3-book graphic novel series about his work in civil rights. John continues his work fighting for the rights of others. He wants children today to fight too. You must lead, he said. You're never too young to lead. You're never too old to lead. We need your leadership now more than ever. Remember the past. Then in 1988, John introduced the idea of a museum dedicated to Black history. In 2016, his dream became a reality. The National Museum of African American History and Culture opened its doors in Washington, D.C. on September 24th. Did you know John was arrested in 2013 for the 45th time? Wow. He was at a rally to protest an immigrant reform bill. 7 other members of Congress were arrested too. Wow. And here is a glossary of words, which I'm going to put up, and you can freeze and read these very important words. Freeze and read. Good. Very good. Well, all right. All right. I have some critical thinking questions for you guys. 3, to be exact. Have you ever experienced something that you felt was unfair? I know, me too. Write it down. What did you do about it? What do you wish you had done differently? That was question number 1. Now, question number 2. Name someone who has inspired you. What causes do they stand for? And list the ways they have fought for change. Question number 3. How was your childhood different than John's? Name a few differences. Then list some similarities. How have your experiences shaped your life? John Lewis. All right. Now, I have another John Lewis book. I'm not going to read this, but it does say at the end, it says, I died in 2020. People honored me in Selma and in Washington, D.C. I changed the country. And this is him. John Lewis, while he was talking. I am going to read the back of this book. This is a book for a younger group. My itty bitty bio is what it says. My itty bitty bio introduces the youngest readers to important cultural figures. Each biography uses simple, short sentences and words familiar to young readers to detail the subject's life. Biographies are written in an engaging first-person voice with historical and contemporary photos and illustrations to keep the reader's interest. Simple questions prompt readers to compare their lives to that of the biography subject. A timeline in the back matter uses repeated images and information learned earlier in the book to reinforce the material. A glossary and index are also included. So maybe I should just show you some of the pictures in here because it is John Lewis's birthday. He was born in Alabama. You can read it. Black people were segregated during this time. He wanted to change that. You can read it and check out the pictures. Whites only bench. Yes, there's so many different pictures in here. This is him. I became a U.S. Congressman. I always worked for equality and peace. This is him. Talking to a young child. Okay. Well, that be it. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me read fun, exciting, educational, and everything. Black History Month books. It's still Black History Month. February is Black History Month. So I got these fantastic books that I am reading for you and will be reading for you. So thanks for being here. Shout out to my mom who is always here. Thank you, Mom. Shout out to everyone who shares my videos, including Elide and Victoria. Thank you. I appreciate you. And you guys helped me get all these subscribers. And I need a few more. So don't forget to go to YouTube, look for Audrey's Reading Area, and smash that subscribe button for me. All right, all right, all right. I will see you tomorrow live, Live, live at 8. See you soon.